Alright, I'm back. So there's one thing I need to do. Well, there's a lot of things I need to do. I just remembered, well, didn't remember, but I had a thought while I was gone. We should have a rectangle, or like a viewport rectangle, that defines the client area. And I believe it's the client area I'm talking about. I'm gonna double check this, but client area. So in Win32 programming, I'm sure it's not just Win32 programming, but let's make sure I understand. Okay, non-client area, client area. So this diagram is pretty good. So what I might want to do is save this later. I'm going to just client area URL. I'm going to put this page in my notes. But the area of the window that you can actually draw to is called the client area, right? When we're doing like OpenGL stuff, we're not going to be drawing any graphics like over on these borders or whatnot. So this is non-client area. So we'll create a rectangle called the client area. We'll call it like rec VPC. So we already have rec VP0, rec VP1. And now we need rec VPC, and I'm going to use C for client area. The reason I'm not going to use a number like 2 is because the numbering is more like having different viewport numbers that copy data and then paste it into viewport 0. So like all the numbered viewports are source viewports, and then VP0 is always the destination viewport. But this client area viewport really doesn't, it's kind of special because I'm not really going to use it like I use the other viewports, right? I'm just going to make sure that that client area viewport is always set to the canvas size, and make sure that GL viewport is always GL viewport, VPC, and the canvas size. Like I always want those to be all equal to each other in terms of dimensions. And that's why VPC, the client area rectangle, that's going to be special. So we're going to go over to our notes really quick. So it would be like, I want to just make sure I still have this. So rec VP1, yep. And then we have a rec VP0 as well. So now we want a rec VPC, right? So if somebody types it correctly, we'll do this. And if somebody types it with dashes, we'll correct it. Or with no spaces. And we'll also make a note of like what rec VPC stands for. Now, with that, we can start to define our rectangle. I'm going to see if I have... So if I'm lucky, in my notes here, I can just like go like edit and what's called dashboard for dash borders. Nope, I don't have that. So edit dashboard. Dashboard edit maybe. Nope. Okay, so these are not in my notes yet, so I'm going to look at my notes because I know that it is somewhere in here. Okay, so dashboard.js. Okay. So it wasn't quite what I thought. But I'm just going to make another synonym in my shortcuts to make it open if I say the other things. So I'll just paste this right here. And the idea is just to have lots of synonyms for the things that I've created. So, you know, in a few years, if I'm like, man, what's that one thing I made so many years ago? I can easily find it. Because I've definitely experienced a lot of losing source code just because it's been lost to time. And so I'm keeping this excessive list of everything so that I can mitigate losing any source code in the future. Okay, so now that we have that, and we know it's called like edit dashboard.js, and that did work. So now I can go over here. I just opened it, and we'll change the language. And the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to look for the rec vp0 and see how I made that. Did I just make it on the fly? Okay, so it looks like I did make these on the fly. So we see rec vp0, and we seal them so they can't be edited. But now that we have like 3 different rectangle objects, it might be time to formalize some type of class object. So what we could do is we could call it rectangle obj, or we could say we could call it inc rec. So maybe because since we write it like rectangle and then a name here, that stands for a rectangle instance, and then a specifier. So this is rectangle vp0, this is rectangle vp1. So if we wrote it rec and then underscore ins for inc for inclusive, that might look like it's a specific rectangle named inc, so I might want to name it inc underscore rec, so that we know it's like an inclusive rectangle, and it can be differentiated from these names. But if we do that, we have to note that we are also breaking the general to specific rule, because it's a rectangle. What kind of rectangle is it? It's an inclusive rectangle. Well, ideally we I kind of am favoring the general to specific, just calling it rec and then inc. And then rec inc is like the generalized term for vp0, vp1, or vpc. I think I'll go with that. So I'm going to just rip this out here really quick, and we're going to, somewhere around here, we're going to define... Well, let's make sure that I didn't break anything first. I'm going to refresh, make sure I don't have any syntax errors that are going to kill me. And it doesn't look like I do. Refresh. Okay, yeah, so we're good. No syntax errors so far. So where are we going to put this? Well, we could... I think what we really need to do is start to consolidate. So we have, this is like a comments section. So let's, we should have a structs section. And because we use the new functions, we don't have to worry about what order the structs are defined in. But that would matter more if we were in like C code. And we're going to make this very C as for comments. And the comments section is the, I don't want anything further below than the comments, just because comments... The comments section usually is what gets like overblown and gets really full. So I like to put the comments section at the very bottom, below everything else. Did I say above or below? So that's below, that's above, that makes sense. So then another thing we're going to do is we're just going to say structs section. And then this is also below. And the structs will also have their constructors with them. And so this isn't going to be, as I'm writing it, I am thinking about how I'm going to convert it to C code, but it's not going to be a one-to-one mapping. It's more a conceptualization, where the conceptualization between the code bases is going to be the same, but it's not going to be like, it's not just going to be like copy, paste, change the syntax. But conceptually, everything is going to be the same, and structurally, I'm going to try to keep everything as similar. And the reason I want to stick to conceptually the same is because I have written 2 identical code bases in 2 different languages and tried to keep them near identical. And then you end up with a lot of like boilerplate code or a lot of bullshit in one or other code base because you're trying to bend the language to behave in a way it's not designed to behave like. So that just makes the maintenance a lot harder. Well, at least I thought. But I do like the idea of having parallel code bases, but just not having 2 code bases in 2 different languages and then trying to keep like the language as similar as possible. Not to say that I'm not going to constrain myself, I am. So, like I said earlier, I'm going to avoid using arrays where I'm changing the size of them on the fly, just because you can't do that in C. Okay, so we have the struct section, and the that rectangle is no longer on my clipboard, so let's go get that again. And we're going to call it rectangle inclusive. And what we can do here is we're going to set these to some type of trap value. And with the trap values, I like to just order them in order. So, you know, we could do 101, 202, you know, 303, and 404. So this rectangle now has 2 problems. One is I never want the rectangles to have negative numbers in them, so that's one reason this is invalid. The other reason it's invalid is because oh wait, hold on. So I want these all to be invalid numbers, so I'm not going to allow negatives, so these are all effectively trap values. Okay, negative 101, 303, so this is less than this, and a proper rectangle will have these coordinates always less than these coordinates. So 4 trap values and improperly formatted even if we allowed negatives, because this is less than this. And so we just want to so this is kind of, this is almost the, this is like the polar opposite of array, I guess. Well, maybe not. So array means, you know, resource acquisition is initialization. And what I'm doing is I'm saying, okay, well, if you request this resource, not only is it not initialized, but it's initialized into a state that is going to fuck your shit up. And that's so I can more easily catch problems if I have a rectangle object and I'm trying to use it and I haven't initialized it yet. So yeah, I mean, yeah, I'm not much, if you've noticed, in most of my constructors, I don't pass any arguments to my constructors. I fill them out after I've created them, and that's just because of the way I program. the code is just more readable, right? Without using any special code analysis tools or autocompletion, filling the object out after you create it without supplying a constructor argument just makes the code more readable. Okay, so we'll call this function, and we'll stick to the naming convention. And, we could say void right here. And within here, yeah, so this is interesting because it's like, this is not really declared outside of this scope as a standalone struct. It's like embedded inside of a constructor, which is obviously something you wouldn't be able to do in C, because all structs are top level in C. So you wouldn't have something nested in a function like this. But that's why I say, the code bases will be conceptually similar, or conceptually the same, but not syntactically same by any means. We could just do that and make that line up since, we're already here, right? We could just do like that, yeah? Well, that's a little bit obtuse. Let's see, hold on. Let's try... Man, I am OCD. Let's try to get this aligned. So if I go... So what I'm looking for is alignment. Okay, so that is aligned. So I'm making sure that things are tab aligned is what I just did there. So this is tab aligned, and then this is also tab aligned, and then there's a little bit of space there because of the tab alignment. This is why I can't use automatic formatting tools, because I'm so particular. Okay, yeah, so that looks good. We could also make a note of what inc rec inc is rectangle inclusive points/bounds. Okay, so now that we have that, the next thing we want to do is go over to our notes, because we don't have a... Or did I just do that? No, I have the rectangle VPC here for the client area, and we'll say rectangle client area rectangle. And just to make sure, so then this will be called rec VPC for viewport client. And then we'll make some more. So like rec viewport client rectangle viewport client, and then say rec VPC. Other things, I think I might have once upon a time had something called cli rec like that. So I want to make sure that I don't. Cli rec, and cli rec, then client rec. Oh, we already have that up there. We'll have cli and then rect, and then cli rect, and cli rect. And if somebody says, right, and then make a little note that rec VPC is rectangle viewport client. Okay. Now let's see. So now we need that rectangle inclusive. So rectangle inclusive rectangle. Okay. And if somebody types that, we're just going to type rectangle inclusive like that. And if they type it properly, then we will recognize with a check mark. 2713 is Unicode for a check mark. If they type it with a dash or with no spaces at all, we will correct it. And we'll also have a way to look up what that variable name means right away. So rec_inc means rectangle inclusive, and it's a struct. So I am going to differentiate between structs and classes. If it's a struct, what I mean by that is it's just data and there are no functions. It's a plain old object. It's data only. It is a C style object, which is just a collection of primitives. Or technically, you could have a pointer to an object if you wanted as well. But even pointers to objects, I would not want that in a struct, because pointers are reference types, and that's almost like the same thing as having that's almost the same thing as like composition, right? So if I compose an object into a struct, is it a struct now or is it an object? So I don't want to do anything hybrid like that. So I'm going to lean towards if it's a struct and it has a whole bunch of like objects / classes that it's referencing via composition, then I'm not going to consider it a struct anymore. Because it's more like a class, and it's a class because of composed inheritance, if that makes sense. But I'm going to try to avoid anything ambiguous so that everything fits in my categories of function, data, or class, right? And data is where the structs go. Data includes primitives and structs. Anyway, so let's keep on going here. Okay, this rectangle inclusive, and let's make a few more entries. So rectangle inclusive and inclusive rectangle. Okay, yeah, so that's good enough. I think we've done enough there. Let's go back to where we're making this. We're gonna want, eventually we'll want you know, 3 of these: the rectangle for the GL viewport / canvas, and then the rectangles for the source and destination viewports. Let's make sure I didn't make any. I gotta stop recording and re